Hey, Spider, I'm back!
Loud in the red zone. Want to hear you chanting loud. We want spiders, CFL's red zone.
Chatting loud in the red zone. Hit it!
Spider, spider, here comes spider, CFL's red zone.
Hit it!
Spider, spider, here comes spider, CFL's red zone.
In the red zone. Howdy doody! No, it's not the Howdy Doody show. It's the Spider CFL Red Zone show. Thanks for all the support. I gotta get my tongue twister here fixed up here. Thanks for all the support for the last video. I really appreciate it. Talked a lot about Touchdown Atlantic and Wolfville and what's happening in the CFL and so forth. The Canadian ratio problem, it's getting worse. I'm going to get into that again in this show. And also talk about how my CFL Red Zone rule, again, like Mr. Vanstone from the Leader Post, and Regina Leader Post, you know, that has been covering the Saskatchewan Roughriders a long time. He's very respectful, and he's an icon actually. He did a famous book, like I mentioned once in my video, on the 1989 Grey Cup between Saskatchewan Roughriders and the Helmand Tiger Cats in the Sky Dome. It was a classic. Anyway, very knowledgeable person, and said, you know, after the 2021 season, sent me an email and said, Spider, the CFL couldn't have written a better script for my CFL Red Zone rule. And he said, it's uncanny. And he said, there's so much ammunition to prove why he used ammo to prove why my CFL Red Zone rule should be adopted and made part of our CFL 3-down game. Because it's a natural, and it's tailor-made for a CFL 3-down game. And at the same time, remarkably, it still will preserve our CFL 3-down game of football. Now, some interesting news. Getting back, what I want to do in this session is talk about that, how my CFL Red Zone rule kills, you know, the hashmark rule, which is an absolute joke. It's so minor, Mickey Mouse. It's not. It's an alteration. Not even that. What Mr. Trestman, Mark Trestman, said about it. You know, it's gimmicky. It's a cover-up, and naturally, Huffnagel, he would never select my CFL Red Zone rule. That was supposed to be on the agenda and present it fully, but they all know about it. Everybody knows about it, okay? And they're ignoring it because it's not theirs and it's not their baby, and then they didn't come up with it, and they want to get all the praise and the credit for the ridiculous hashmark rules. I mean, that hashmark rule is ridiculous. It's caused more sideways passes, right? Like more sideways, shorter, because they're narrow, the hash marks. Even shorter and more 2-and-outs. So Randy Ambrosi said, oh, the hash mark rule, the greatest thing since sliced bread. He said he was going to make CFL football the best brand of football in the world, and that's over the NFL. He said it was going to basically eliminate, he did, seriously, eliminate 2-and-outs and increase touchdowns dramatically. And look what's happening with the 2-and-outs. They're brutal. And look what's happening in the red zone with 2-down football stops, okay? So chant loud in the red zone. If you don't want any more boring, distasteful, non-eventful, easy chip shot field goals in the red zone, okay? After that boring, witnessing another boring 2-down football stop in the red zone, chant loud in the red zone. Get the word out. Get the word out. You imagine a CFL stadium chanting loud in the red zone when this happens over and over and over, and it's so boring, and they turn off the TV. They don't watch because of the Canadian ratio either, and I'll get into that in a minute. But it's so boring, and you need to chant loud. The impact of that would be incredible. Chant loud in the red zone. We want Spider CFL Red Zone rule when this is happening in the red zone over and over and over. It's that in 3-down football, no football fan wants to see, and that's what's killing. That's one of the biggest killers and turnouts of our CFL 3-down game of football. 2-down football stops in the red zone, resulting in more predictable non-eventful easy chip shot field goals, which is killing our CFL 3-down game. And basically playing 2-down football, getting all the way down to the red zone, and then, you know, even on the 2-yard line, okay? And unless they're on the 1 yard, then they don't go for it in third down and score a touchdown in the red zone. So even on the 2, okay, to the 5, right up to the 20, they don't go for it. Actually, Hamilton in Montreal the other day went and third and 6, and they were on the 7-yard line, and they gambled. But there's my rule. There's my rule. But what's so remarkable about my rule is that it's an enforcement rule. So when you have an enforcement rule, okay, in this case, when you're playing 2-down football, you know, it's not 3-down football, 4-down football like American football. It's 2-down football to get a first down. And a 110-yard field, okay? So it's a longer field than the NFL field and much wider. It's 65 versus 53. So to get down, march down the field, okay, and to get in the red zone and play 2-down football, and with my CFL red zone rule, there'll be enforcement rule. So if they're stopped on the 2nd down, they'll be playing exciting 3-down football in my CFL red zone rule, okay? And if they don't score a touchdown on the 3rd down, okay, and then remember it's an enforcement rule, okay? That's where my CFL red zone rule, CFL red zone kick comes into play, because it's an enforcement rule. You got to. That's very important to note, and also very important to note as well. Right now in the CFL they can play my CFL red zone rule, just like the Hamilton Tigers did it in Montreal. In Montreal on the weekend. Good game, by the way. Congratulations, Gary Stern. I'll get into him a little later too. So anyway, but the thing is, they didn't get any points, right? That's the thing. But with my CFL red zone rule, what's remarkable about it, and by the way, like I said, they can play with it now, and with my CFL red zone rule, just like 3rd and 6 on the 7-yard line, you can still get a first down by CFL red zone rule. Nothing changes. They can play with it now, okay? The main difference here is that it's an enforcement rule. They have to go for it in 3rd down if needed in the red zone. And if they maintain possession of the ball and are not forced outside the red zone in 3rd down, like the Tiger Cats, they threw a ball in the red zone. It was over the receiver's head. But that's not a turnover. If it's a turnover, then, you know, they lose the CFL red zone rule kick. But if they maintain possession of the ball, because it's an enforcement rule, my CFL red zone rule, they get the kick, okay? And if they're not forced outside the red zone in 3rd down, they get to kick my CFL red zone rule kick, or CFL red zone kick from the 35. When you add the 7, it's from the 42. It's got to be from the 42. Okay, so they can still come up, and it's a challenging kick, by the way, so there'll be more drama at it. They can still come up with 3 points. But the drama and the excitement in the red zone with my CFL red zone rule in every CFL game would be unbelievable. And if you just, what I just said, if you compare that with the ridiculous Mickey Mouse little alteration, I mean, come on, Huffnagel, Brandy Ambrosi little hashmark rule, that's an absolute embarrassment. And like I said, it's causing more 2-and-outs. There's shorter sideway passes now. Sideway passes, no CFL fan or football fan wants to see sideway passes, especially with a narrow hash mark. They want to see big passes, especially playing 2-down football to get in the red zone, vertically down the field. And that's where my CFL red zone rule comes in, and it's so powerful. It's so powerful, because they'd be doing that a lot. You wouldn't see the sideway passes, and you wouldn't see the 2-and-outs. You'd see big passing plays to get in the red zone. They'll play exciting 3-down football, my CFL red zone rule. And another thing you would see, near the 20-yard line, they'd be going for it more on 3rd down to keep the drive going, so they can get in the red zone to play my CFL red zone rule. That's why Farrar and Lodgy endorsed it. That's why Steve Armitage, who's a sports legend, did 27 Grey Cups, endorsed it, was fascinated by it. And Farrar and Lodgy said if it comes to a vote, and he has a vote, he will vote for my CFL red zone rule to be made part of our CFL 3-down game. And if Rob Vanstone did a vote at Saskatchewan, the Regina Leader Post, he's another sports icon legend, he would vote for it as well too. And I got it to Gary Stern. I got it to his direct email, and I got my CFL red zone rule to Gary Stern. Now, what Gary Stern has to do is be bold, like he's being bold on Twitter and predicting that the Alouettes beat the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, which they did, and they beat 29-28 against the Tiger Cats. That was an exciting game. The Winnipeg game was unbelievable too. 31,000 people. That's what CFL football should be. But my CFL red zone rule would make it way better. Way better. It would be a more powerful down than the NFL fourth down in the red zone. A more exciting down. And more impactful. It'd be a lot more impactful too. And a much bigger down. And it would put a real signature on our third down. Okay? And on CFL 3-down football. It would be huge. And by the way, the NFL can't steal my CFL red zone rule because it would not work with 4-down football. But work perfectly and naturally with CFL 3-down football like it's meant for, and actually it's tailor-made for CFL 3-down game. And by the way, every CFL game, my CFL red zone rule is there. Staring the CFL right in the eye, and then Brosy and everybody on the CFL red zone. On the CFL Rules Committee and on the Innovation Rules Committee that was supposed to be looking at my CFL red zone rule. But like I said, it's jealousy, it's ego, and it's because, like Steve Armstrong said, because they didn't come up with it themselves. Okay, that's pretty bad, isn't it? What a story! How it would be a huge selling feature to say that Spider, okay, me Spider, a loyal CFL fan. Historic CFL super fan from Halifax, like all of you out there, and the younger generation that would be in love and fascinated and captivated by CFL red zone rule. I mean, what a story to tell that Spider from Halifax come up with my CFL red zone rule to sell it, to tell and sell it. It would be unbelievable. And so their ego is outrageous, and it's terrible. And the Canadian ratio is terrible too. The Canadian ratio is the reason why you can't build, and it was said on the Green Zone action, I picked up on it. He said, how do you build, the question was, how do you build a competitive CFL team with the Canadian ratio? You can't. And the proof is in the pudding. Just look at the standings. Look at the East compared with the West. It's double. There's double points in the Western Division of the CFL than in the Eastern Division. So and it's because of the Canadian ratio. You can't build competitive teams, 9 teams in the CFL, and half the roster has to be Canadian. That's part of the Canadian ratio. Half the roster, and 7 starters guaranteed to start, okay, and next year it'll be 8. Can you imagine? And that American nationalized is just a bunch of garbage. I mean, there'd be 8 playing. There'd be 9 because they try to play one more in case there's an injury. And with injuries, it's brutal. The Canadian ratio is killing the CFL. It's watering down the product on the field. It's so noticeable on the field, and the juggling of alignments. You can't play your best American play. It's unbelievable. You can't recruit the best American players. You can't recruit the best old linemen. And the old linemen, the Canadian old linemen, are getting 250,000 to 250,000 because of the guaranteed starter Canadian ratio, and that's where they put them. Look at Saskatchewan Roughriders old line. It's terrible. Even Winnipeg's isn't that great. All the CFL teams, Ottawa, all the CFL teams, Hamilton is brutal. Their O-line is because of the guaranteed Canadian starter ratio, and that's where they put them. That they put the O-lineman there to fill it. And with injuries, it's almost virtually impossible. And by the way, there's 25 top Canadian players now in the NFL and counting. That's like the Ottawa Rough Rider coach. He's in BC now. Anyway, he said that that's like a whole CFL team, and he was complaining about the Canadian ratio, and it's unbelievable. I mean, it's really, and the thing is, here's the problem: the Canadian players are controlling the CFL and dictating who plays and who starts. They're handcuffing the teams. And they're really handcuffing the fans because the fans want to see the best players, and they keep shoving this down their throat, and they keep and what's unbelievable is TSN pushes it because they're so desperate for programming that they push the owners to sign and give them anything, sign anything, and they won't lock them out. And where are they going to go and get jobs? This is the problem with the CFL. The owners got to sit down and say, no more of this. But they signed a 7-year deal. You're going to have this garbage. And you're going to have the same problem with all these weak links on teams because of the Canadian ratio that, I mean, that have no business being on the field a lot of them. Now the Philpott brothers are different. They deserve to be there. And I think Anthony Smith's son in Hamilton, receiver. But there's hardly, I can't count any more. There's not many. Durant, Dempsey, so forth maybe, but there's not many more, a few more, but you can't name a couple good, really Canadian, good old linemen that deserve to be there, but you can only name a couple. That's why it's so diluted. And they're taking a lot of the salary cap because they can demand so much money because they know they have to start them at O-line positions. Even if they're no good, they're not good enough, they're no business being in the CFL field. That's what's wrong with the CFL. And by the way, there's no restrictions on them. The Canadian players want to go to the NFL as much, right, as the American players. And you have the one-year contracts, which they didn't even touch, which is brutal, which is killing the CFL. It's killing the CFL. And so they can all, including the quarterbacks, can all get out of their contracts, and all the quarterbacks can go down the NFL, try to make in the CFL, try to make the NFL, and all the players, and the Canadian players are just as anxious as the American players, and because they're basically the Canadian Players Association, made up of Canadian linemen, guaranteed starting linemen, and this is the problem with the CFL. This is why the CFL is called a bush league, and the flags, by the way, are insane. And this is another reason: poor management. The CFL. I mean, they should tell those referees, you keep. Like borderline calls, none of them are called. The flags are insane. That's why they make fun of the CFL, the Canadian Flag Football League, whatever. You know, and the Canadian ratio, a lot of people will not go and watch the CFL because they want to watch the best players. You imagine the Maple Leafs, okay, or the Blue Jays, or the fans saying, if they had a Canadian ratio and they couldn't bring in the best players to compete, and it was horrible product on the field, and so many weak links and everything, the place would be empty. They'd be out of business. You know what? Rafter and Leaf and Blue Jay, they don't care if there's even one Canadian on. They don't care. They want to see the best players. And if you want to be a player and be in a real professional sports league and compete, that's what you have to do. And the CFL has just gone the other way because they allowed the Canadian players to run the CFL and to ruin the CFL, run it into the ground. And that's why there's so many empty seats. It's brutal. Listen, I'm so Canadian, I don't even watch the NFL, or my son. But my son's not even renewing his season tickets at 15 years, and he hasn't gone to one game this year. He's lost all interest what they did to my CFL red zone rule and the Canadian ratio. His friends won't go because of the Canadian ratio. Also, they love my CFL red zone rule, and if the Canadian ratio was gone, imagine my CFL red zone rule was implemented, and the CFL was allowed, like every other professional sports league, to start and play, the best players at every position for an entire CFL game, which is logical, isn't it? This is professional football. They're charging expensive prices, okay? Then you'd have a product in the CFL. And with my CFL red zone rule, then the CFL would have a product, a fantastic product. But anyway, I'm 18 minutes in, and I'm on a roll. I covered quite a bit. This is all ab lib, okay? But Bo Levi Mitchell, I put the Calgary Stampeder hat out front because I want to talk about the Stampeders. Bo Levi Mitchell is not playing against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers tonight, and it's Mayer playing. So he's starting. He played last year, I believe, was against them in Winnipeg and almost beat them when Bo Levi Mitchell was injured. But Bo Levi Mitchell, I watched the Toronto game, and they were lucky to win. But he's missing the target and blaming on the receivers and everybody else but himself. But he's not accurate. And let's hope that, I mean, for his sake, I mean, he'll probably go in the Canadian Football Hall of Fame, but let's hope that I mean, he does come back and he does do better, and he has another opportunity to prove himself. But I think the surgery is really, I mean, I feel bad for him in a way. I mean, a lot of people, I think it's a 50-50 split in Calgary, but I mean, it's all about winning, okay? And so they made a evaluation, and they made the decision. I think it's the right decision, but we'll see tonight, okay? On the Alouettes, Gary Stern, I wanted to get back to him. Yeah, I sent him my CFL Red Zone rule. I mean, he said that he had to get permission from Randy Ambrosi CFL to go on the Markcast. That's how bad it is. So he's not going to say a word about my CFL Red Zone rule, because if he did, but I'd love to him. I mean, what an opportunity for him. Like the Alouettes. I mean, they lost many games because of not having my CFL Red Zone rule and the Red Zone rule to play with. They would have won. And I mentioned that to him. And you can imagine him tweeting out, "We want Spiders CFL Red Zone rule," and then underneath saying, because it would be the biggest rule in CFL history, and the most significant rule, and the most powerful rule, and because it would totally eliminate, you imagine, remarkably totally eliminate 2 down football stops in the red zone, and remarkably totally eliminate, imagine, all the boring, distasteful, non-eventful, predictable, predictable, easy chip shot field goals in the red zone. Both completely gone. The 2 biggest killers, 2 biggest turn-offs of CFL 3-down game in the red zone, completely gone. What a selling feature for the CFL to sell. Imagine if he said that in a tweet. And I'm gonna throw it out there at him at the right time. I mean, I know Rob Banstone of the Regina Leader Post would love it. I mean, can you imagine the response and the reaction of fans? I mean, all football fans and sports fans, what that would do to spark the interest in my CFL Red Zone rule. I would love to. I mean, he's bold. I would love for him to do that. I mean, there's so many opportunities. I mean, they lost games because if my CFL Red Zone rule would have been in play, the Alouettes would have won more games. Other teams would have too in the East, I believe. Calgary probably would have too. I mean, listen, Canadian ratio is a major issue that's got to be eliminated. I mean, if they want to put Canadian players, I'm so Canadian, like I don't even watch the NFL, same my son, and just the CFL, and now my son's losing interest, you know, after 15 years having 2 season tickets, Stampeders season tickets in Calgary, and I was at the Grey Cup with him, at the last Grey Cup, and Winnipeg Blue Bombers won the Grey Cup. I mean, it's sad, but this is what's happening. This is what the CFL are doing. They're turning off loyal CFL fans like myself, like my son, because they won't change the Canadian. They make it worse, and because my CFL Red Zone rule is not their baby. They ignore it because of ego, and because they didn't come up with themselves, that they can it deliberately, trash it. It's unbelievable. That's the CFL, and that's why they're called a Bush League. They're not respected, and they're not supported. And the hashmark rule is an absolute joke, an embarrassment. Okay, and my CFL Red Zone rule kills it. Okay, and by the way, that gentleman's right. In the green zone, he's a host with Jamie and I, when he said, "How do you build a competitive CFL team with the Canadian ratio?" It means you can't. He said it's almost impossible, and he's exactly right. It's almost impossible. Now, I just want to touch a little bit on Touchdown Atlantic in 2023. The CFL are looking to do it again. I have some insight. They're looking to do Touchdown Atlantic again. And they're looking to go at St. Mary's, but St. Mary's gets still an issue. I was down there. They had a major construction problem, and they're building an extension there off the cafeteria that's gonna be a problem for putting up the stands, temporary stands that they were going to put up, which was quite a bit higher, 42 rows, and I think it was 35 or 32 in Wolfville, but on that side. So I don't know how they could ever accommodate it there. So I'd probably go back to Wolfville, which would be a smart move. Wolfville's a natural. And by the way, there was a restaurant on the main strip there that had a fire. That's a sad. There's a picture of it. Sad. And there's a lot of people in all those patios and all the restaurants. It was just booming, the economy there. What it did, Touchdown Atlantic for Wolfville. And this is the first one. Toronto Argonauts and Hamilton Tiger Cats, Touchdown Atlantic. Okay, at SMU, St. Mary's, first one, and this is a very, popular hat. One of the first one that's really cool. I got several of them. Have a little drink here from my son's SPYDER CFL Red Zone Bowl. Anyway, just winding down, and I just want to thank you so much, and hope you're having a good summer. I'm struggling still with my injuries. I'm having relapses all the time. I'm swimming though in my pool and like trying to get exercise and trying to beat it, get calcium in my body, to get my bones stronger and so forth. It's been a tough go, but I'm alive and I'm back on set, and I wanted to come back. But there's some good, that game tonight's going to be good to watch, Calgary and Winnipeg. They can beat them 3 times. I expect they probably have another big crowd there. I mean, actually Montreal, Alouettes had a pretty good crowd in Montreal. They said it was 21. I think it was probably less than that. Toronto, it was brutal again. Hamilton's they're not getting good crowds. Ottawa, it was just, they lost the game. And there's another thing, the Canadian ratio is killing the Ottawa Red Blacks. That's why they're so weak. That's the reason. That's why the league there's no parity. It's brutal. There's only like the BC Lions, Stampeders, Saskatchewan Roughriders, and of course Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I mean, the East, they're very, very weak teams. Montreal, after beating Winnipeg and beating Hamilton, they're starting to look like they're a better team and compete. The best team actually probably in the East right now. And Gary Stern, with his predictions, his bold predictions, is a hero. I think he's a celebrity. He's flamboyant. He's a cool guy. He would be the perfect guy to expose my CFL Red Zone at the right time. It's got to be the right time. And by the way, there's many right times, because, by the way, every game you watch, CFL game, you watch my CFL Red Zone is staring. Every game, it's there, and it's staring the CFL right in the eye, waiting to be adopted. So Gary Stern, jump on that, okay? And you'd be a hero, okay? Jump on that and expose it. SPYDER CFL Red Zone rule and why. Especially if you lose a game with 2 down football stops, and you will in the red zone, okay? Resulting in more boring, predictable, non-eventful, easy chip shot field goals rather than touchdowns. CFL fans want to see touchdowns. Anyway, signing off, Spider, here comes Spiders, CFL Red Zone rule. Take care, have a good summer. We'll see you soon.